We're going to talk a little bit about Michigan politics, though, right now, politics in general. John Williams is back with us. He is the political science professor at Kellogg Community College. John, good morning. Nice to see you again.
Oh, thanks, Tim. Good morning to you.
So, what are your students saying about all of this Kavanaugh and election stuff? I mean, do they speak up, or are they kind of like just block it out? Or I mean, what's the overall?
So that's that. It's always, it depends on the dynamics of a class. It's funny because different classrooms will have different students, and it usually takes one or two students to kind of break the ice, and then the dam just break the dam and it just flows out. But other times it's like pulling teeth to try to get the students to engage, regardless of what the topic is. And so, but Kavanaugh's been a hot topic, but there's been a number of them. I mean, they come in rapid fire succession with, this, not just this administration, but the last administration. It's been heating up. So it's been never a dull moment.
Is it? Am I wrong, or do you probably attract some of the more engaged and outspoken students because they're going to take your class, whereas students who don't give a rip about anything in politics and have never voted and never will, they're not going to take your class.
Yeah, I think there's a, I mean, and it ebbs and flows too in terms of individual students. Kind of that sentiment of getting engaged. I mean, we've had some strong attendance to the political science classes, and that's not always the case. Like I said, sometimes it ebbs and flows. But I think things that are hot and students want to be able to be a part of the conversation and want to be a part of the, what they might believe to be kind of a seminal moment of their generation. And so they want to be able to, I think, in my opinion, want to be able to speak intelligently about it, know what's going on, and not just, add to the noise. And so, yeah, we do. I get some really good students who are very well informed, and then I get some students that are, this class happened to fit in my schedule, I thought I'd take it.
Yeah, right.
I was there too. So
yesterday, I guess, Taylor Swift sort of put her toe in the political arena a little bit and got 65,000 young people to register to vote.
Sure.
Now, based on your observations at our campus here, how would, if those 65,000 were representative of the students we have here, how would they be voting?
Yeah, that's always a good question as well. I mean, the conventional wisdom is that the younger individuals tend to be more liberal, older individuals tend to be more conservative, right? The old adage, right?
Sure.
If you're young and you're not a liberal, you got no heart, kind of a thing. And so, more often than not, the idea to change the world and to create that change, and not necessarily think in terms of laws in place and a process in place. So you'd have to believe that the younger the individuals are who are getting involved, particularly if it's because of the siren call of Taylor Swift, they're probably more liberal voters. But I mean, there's a class of young individuals as well who, and this happens all the time as well. If you feel like you're getting pushed one way, it's almost that counter culture where you think students are picking up kind of this, the liberal ideology, but if they feel that they're being pushed in that liberal ideology, there's a pushback, and you do see some conservative students rise from that, start following Ben Shapiro and Louder Crowder and those guys, and you kind of get that contingent of students who also rise up. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I mentioned before the hour started, this idea of to the victors go the spoils system. It's always been that. I mean, it's kind of human nature, I guess. It probably goes back to the Vikings,
Sure.
And the Attila the Hun and such. But, politically, we've had that system too. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why this coalition to put an anti-gerrymandering proposal on the ballot was successful. That's their intent with Proposal 2, to no longer let the ruling party divide up the districts for after each census.
Sure.
And I guess, well, first of all, that proposal, have you guys looked at it in class? Have you been talking about it?
Not in deep detail. The Proposal 1 team, seems the recreational marijuana seems to get a little bit more of the attention, and that's getting more of the attention. I mean, it's not just my students bringing it forward, but but kind of in the background is Proposal 2, and even further in the background is Proposal 3. Just for my students, to try to get them, aware. We don't necessarily have the opportunity in each class to go over in deep detail what all is going to be on the ballot, but there's a website called battlecreek.youtube.
Right.
.org, which is really just a good, what you can put your address in there. It'll tell you what's on your ballot. It'll give you kind of both the thumbnail sketch and then the full amount of information. But as far as proposal 2 goes, I mean, when we start talking about proposals, you talk about who ultimately benefits and who feels like they're not going to benefit from this. And I mean, clearly this is it's coming from the left, it's coming from the Democratic Party, even though it seems to be a benign. We should all benefit from independently drawn districts, but the truth of the matter is that the districts as drawn have favored the Republicans, and you wouldn't expect the Republicans wanting to change that that setup. So
I had the Republican candidate for Secretary of State here yesterday.
Sure.
She was against Proposal 2.
Yeah,
had some pretty good stated reasons for being against it. One being that just the cost to the taxpayers of paying for a system that you may just let consultants have a lot more say than they should. Sort of the way that lobbyists have a lot more say in our system. Sure. As a result of term limits.
Right. Right. And if you don't, if you think that somehow the political parties and the influence of the political parties are going to be cut out of that process, that's just not going to happen. There's going to be pressure. There's going to be investigation and pressure that's going to come from both sides, because it is, how districts are drawn is important. And the idea, I like the idea. I get the idea that you want the district to kind of represent the individuals, but at the same time, there are pockets, right? Strong pockets of Republicans, and then there are strong pockets of Democrats, and they have different wants from their state government. And it'll be interesting to see how they're going to try to draw the districts in a way that gets you to parity. And at the end of the day, the person who represents that district is going to have 50% that support their ideas, and then 50% that don't. And I'm not sure that's good representation. So.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the voters say about this.
Yeah.
There's certainly a one-sided TV campaign right now in favor of Proposal 2, where they draw the cartoons and they lay it out. I don't see a lot of opposition against that that's visible.
Yeah.
There is opposition, but not that's visible.
Well, I think what happened, and kind of some of the regarding the 3 proposals that are on the ballot, but really there was 3 that came off. The one that came off regarding the wage laws in terms of
Michigan one fair wage.
Yeah, that came off because the Republicans had the majority, and putting it on the ballot wasn't going to be necessary, because that was really a Republican-led or conservative-led proposal. And then it allowed, because of the other ballot measures, and it seems that regardless of recreational marijuana, the districting, and then the third proposal is on straight ticket voting and voter registration and the like. How those changes were coming about was a way that you could basically make the statement, vote no across the board. Why the Republican majorities took the minimum wage off, and there was a second ballot proposal they also took off.
The Michigan time to care.
That's right, family leave.
Yeah,
sick leave, correct. Yeah, that they took those off. I understand. So based upon the information I had, when the medical marijuana initiative passed, it ultimately it really hamstrings your legislature from tinkering with it at all. It becomes you have to have a super majority in the legislature to actually change those laws. And so if they're not written well and they get passed, then you're stuck with them. And so I kind of understand the philosophy of saying, all right, well, we're going to pass this as is, and then if we have to tinker with it, then it's just a basic majority in the legislature to do that. So it allows you to if there's a problem with the law and it's how it's being passed and then enforced, you can go in and do what the legislature is supposed to do. So I understand why they would take that off, but at the same time, there's the political fallout from that. Personally, I'd rather see if a proposal comes up, put it before the voters, let the voters vote it in or vote it down. But then that takes the dollars and the time to run the campaign, you know, presenting you're either for it or against it, and that's costly and time.
And the Republican majority is saying, well, that's what we did with marijuana. Let's let the voters decide that one.
Yeah.
It's kind of a hot potato that nobody really wanted to touch.
Yeah.
And so the voters will decide that one. But yeah, like you say, there was these proposals that gathered enough signatures, protecting Michigan taxpayers, that would repeal the Prevailing Wage and Fringe Benefits Act. And then there was the Michigan One Fair Wage, which would be a minimum wage increase. And then the Time to Care, which would provide sick leave to personal or family reasons for certain family members. Those all didn't make it, even though there was enough signatures and the Board of Canvassers said, yeah, it can go to the ballot. They kind of short-circuited that. And maybe when we come back in a minute, we can talk about politically why they do that kind of stuff. It kind of goes back to the spoil system a little bit, and I guess they do it because they can. Talking about these ballot proposals, there's 3 of them we're going to be voting on: the marijuana legalization, the anti-gerrymandering, and then the let's make it easier to vote proposal. But 3 did not make it, and basically the Republicans, with the majority in the state and Senate here in Michigan, they looked at it and they thought, what? So, and then, you know, what we were talking about off air, that the idea, you have to believe that the consideration goes in terms of what the impact is going to be on turnout in an election. I mean, you know, it's a team sport. And these days it's a full contact sport, and so you're always thinking about how you can kind of get yourself across the line. And you know, generally speaking, midterm elections, I'm sure the history, when you have a Republican president and a Republican legislature, the legislature is going to lose seats, and that carries all the way down into the states as well. We all are impacted by what potentially could be a blue wave, and I have to believe that the Republicans in Lansing were thinking, how do we mitigate or minimize that impact? And we certainly don't need more individuals coming out to vote on specific issues that we may be able to, you know, pass. They've been passed, but at the same time, hopefully, I think, or what the Republicans were thinking was that this would diminish a specific group, that this is their single issue from going to the polls and probably being more liberal and more inclined to vote for their Democratic counterparts. Case in point, the Michigan One Fair Wage, the proposed initiated law would gradually increase the hourly minimum wage from $10 in 2019 to $12 in 2022. They got their position through. The State Board of Canvassers said, yep, it can go on the ballot. The legislature said, oh, wait a minute, we'll take care of that. But they haven't completely taken care of it. I mean, they could still, after the election, and there's a legal argument about this, but they could still go in and tweak and say, hey, we didn't really mean it. We'll give you $10.50. Yeah, the possibility is there. And again, because of that, you know, you have to consider that in terms of the elections and whether or not the individual you want to put back in Lansing might do that, and whether you'd support that. I mean, there's still an election process going on. But it was the Republicans, if I remember correctly, the last time that the minimum wage issue came up that passed it last time. And it's, of course, the minimum wage has steadily gone up since. From the time that you and I probably got our first jobs, it's steadily gone up. $1.60. It's $1.60 my first job at minimum wage. Protecting Michigan taxpayers, that was about the prevailing wage, and basically the legislature did say, all right, yeah, we're going to adopt this one. Yeah, and that was that had a conservative push behind it to begin with. One individual who was strongly behind it was Ron Weiser, and he's the current party chairman. And, you know, it's a pro-business, the argument's pro-business, pro-growth, and it ultimately decreases the cost to municipalities and school districts for construction. So, that was the argument. But again, you still have those liberal connotations and conservative connotations in terms of who it would benefit. But that one was one we didn't have to put on the ballot, didn't necessarily have to. Again, would it drive more Democrat voters or Republican voters if it were on the ballot?
And I assume that was the consideration that.
Yeah, there could have been large labor unions that might have mobilized their members to get out and vote against that. Yeah. So they cut it off at the pass and just said we're going to pass it.
Yeah.
And you're a county commissioner over in Jackson. Yeah. All this will do now is give you guys on county boards and similar entities a chance to look at a proposal and say, you know what, we don't have to take this bid now. Right. We can actually go with this bid,
right,
and just decide what's going to be the best for the county in terms of not just money but service and everything else.
Right, and and of course we're elected officials as well. I mean, so we feel it within our district. We have to have a finger on the pulse of our community and our districts as to what will be supported or won't, and more often than not, you're going to find that whatever the local government is, they want to go with their local guys. And if the local guys are a little more expensive, they'll go with them anyway because they want to keep the dollars local. So, those decisions are made that way.
And then the proposed initiated law for employers being required to provide sick leave for personal or family health reasons. That's another one that could have mobilized a segment of the population, but they won't be going to vote. But, then I think you kind of alluded to this earlier, John. Are there going to be a bunch of people who are just mad because they didn't go on the ballot and they're going to go and vote against the Republicans?
Right. And so that's always the possibility, too. I don't, you get caught in that. You're really kind of trying to piece it out and figure out. It's a strategy game. I mean, and it sounds callous to call it a game, but at the end of the day, as I tell my students, it's a numbers game. If your issues or your ideas are on the right or on the left, if you don't have the members in there in the legislature to push those ideas, then those ideas don't come forward. And so oftentimes it's less about who the particular candidates are, right, in terms of who ultimately gets elected, but it comes down to the numbers, holding the majorities. So you may give up a legislator in this district and pick up one in another, and I have to believe, and having been there, I know this goes on to a degree, they have a number of individuals who are really looking at it and really parsing that out that way.
You know what I think it comes down to? Back when George W. Bush was president, a lot of his critics, he's the stupidest man on earth. Right. I hate him. Right. I hate him. I hate him. And those same people now are telling me, he was really a pretty good guy. He really did good stuff. He was okay. And I still don't like that Cheney, but I like Bush,
Right.
My point is it doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, the other side is going to hate no matter what.
Yeah.
The question is there an issue that will be a hot button issue that will emotionally charge a voter to the point of getting off their butt and mobilizing and going to the polls? And I think that's what this proposal thing is all about. Let's try and keep a lid on that. And boy, there's so much more we could talk about, like whether or not making it easier to vote is a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe we'll talk about that if we get time here come up in the future. But thanks a lot for spending some time with us, John.
Hey, I appreciate it. And again, I always, for your listeners, come out to KCC, take some classes out there. You get the real deal all the time.
Absolutely. John Williams, KCC political science professor here on WBCK.